The mind is a complex minefield where scientists and psychologists get to run around in this large labyrinth we call our brain. And just as we think we're reaching the end, just as we think we have the whole picture within our hands, we just end up getting a bigger mess. And that's why I chose John Ronson's Strange Answers to the Psychopath Test. In it, he talks about how we diagnose mental disorders in the strangest of ways and how there's probably a psychopath within all of us. One of the great things he did in his speech was that he gave a very forceful inflection about his feelings in this speech. These are all his life experiences that led him to come to this epiphany that psychology has this large moral gray area that people don't really understand, that really anybody could be labeled as a psychopath if they just meet all the requirements in a checklist, which is a little unsettling. But what he did do very well was when there was something that was seemingly unimportant or even something that would sound boring, he made it almost as if it was a joke. There were so many little morbid topics within his speech that actually gave me the chills when I first watched it, that he just kind of brushed off and made it some sort of a joke. He was talking about how he looked at all of these psychological medical books and found out he had all of these mental disorders and all sorts of things like that. And the audience laughed at him because he kind of brushed it off as something like, oh yeah, look at all these things, all these little malformities that I have that science says that I currently need to be medicated for, those kind of things. And it helps the audience get engaged with this very sensitive topic that he's speaking about. He used a large projection behind him, along with audio aid, to help illustrate some of the more complex points he was talking about, especially when they introduced the man that he was going to visit at this large, I would say, asylum for the insane, the criminally insane. And there was a large drawing of the building that this man was in. It was all cartoony, but it all had that nitty gritty look to it. So you understood the gravity of what he was talking about, and it had the sounds of swinging bars and people walking through hallways. So you really got the feel of what it was like when he was there, which really aided his speech for all the little mishaps that he may have had when he was joking about, oh, I have this sort of mental disorder and things like that. And then it drew us back into this more serious talk about psychology and how it may be able to label some people in having psychological disorders. One of the TED commandments that this speaker followed the best was probably dreaming big, because he was very interested in the field of psychology and he wanted to know more about these people who have been claimed to be, mentally insane and were psychopaths. And he realized that a lot of them are found in the strangest of places, such as CEOs of companies are psychopaths because they're cold and heartless and they crack jokes about people getting laid off. So he wanted to explore more into this, and he led us into that world where we would all talk about how everyone's a psychopath, but we're all collectively okay with it. It's a strange thing to try and persuade an audience to do, but I think he did a very good job with it. In comparison to Sir Ken Robinson's video for School Kills Creativity, Ken was very stern standing. He was very immobile, I would say. His arms would move, his head would move. That was one of the things that both of them have done. They looked across the audience and were cracking jokes to all of them in a very normal, relaxed voice, really. But Ken was very stiff. He was very professional in his stance. And he would ask rhetorical questions to the audience so that he could keep them engaged and continue talking on and on and on. But John had this way of going back and forth and looking around and making all sorts of concise pauses within his speech that really gave him that more natural feel as opposed to Ken's, who seemed very pomp and circumstance kind of speech that he gave. For the dynamicism of John was probably about a 3, I would say. His voice is very monotone, I would say. He does have a bit of a eccentric personality hidden inside of him, which does help with his speeches, and it really does engage the audience. But I think it was hidden away, all of his things that he did wrong with his speech, by this brilliant animation behind him and audio aid with his visual aid, that he doesn't really have all that firm motion behind him when he's talking about his subjects. And I think that's personally just how he is as a person. So I really can't dock him for that. But it's certainly something that I noticed, and it was something that Ken did better in his speech than John had in his. For what I learned about speech delivery from watching him was that you should just speak normally as if you're talking to someone you know. You know, just don't feel like that you need to speak in a certain manner for public speaking and try and persuade others that this is my public speaking voice. This is how I sound when I'm speaking to crowds. Don't sound fake. That was one of the things I learned the most. It was don't sound fake. And overall, I learned a bit of a lesson through all of these videos. And my best advice I can give to someone from this video is talk to the camera as if this is a politician that you've known for many years, and make sure that you talk nice and slow and concise, and make sure that they know what you're saying, and make sure that all of your points are driven home as you're speaking about them. Why compare a slow politician that you've known for years? Well, you don't want to offend a politician, so you don't want to be too erratic in your movements and in your speaking. You don't want to offend them, but they're still your friend. So talk normally like you would to anyone else. But remember to be slow and concise so that everyone hears exactly what needs to be heard from your speech. And that's my evaluation. My name is Alex Roth.